Yeah, he's fine, that's for sure. All right, I would like to call to order the Town of Fraser Board meeting for July 17th, 2024 at 6 p.m. Can I have a roll call, please?
Katie Fisher,
Adam Quicklin.
Peggy Smith,
Julie White,
Louis Gregory.
Katie Souls.
And Brian Sirkvenik. Could I have an approval of the agenda?
So moved. I'll second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Mr. Mayor, they have their name tags switched. If that makes any difference.
oh yeah,
Katie and Adam.
yeah, swap those.
Freaky Friday.
Freaky Friday.
Thank you, Louis.
All right, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes for June 27th, 2024, and resolution 2024-0706, MPE contract or burial of power lines.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we'll move on to open forum. So this is for anything not on the agenda that you would like to bring to the board. You'd have 3 minutes of time, and I'll start with people in the audience. Anybody want to speak for open forum? Okay, how about online? Please raise your hand if you'd like to speak. Okay, keep moving. All right, discussion, possible action, treasurer's report, Lori.
Going to move forward. Okay, yeah, the usual statement of funds, sales tax revenue, and the short-term tax revenue. We'll take a look at all of those. First, as I've discussed before, here it is, the beginning of summer projects are beginning. So that dark blue, your general fund reserves are kind of going down. But they have decreased, but what, giving a shout out to the water crew, they found the leak, and the leak was repaired. That was over on Railroad Avenue behind Ace Hardware. And right now that is saving approximately 6,500 gallons of water per day that leak got repaired. And so it's starting to already pay for itself. And then the other project they did was they did a sewer grout injection on the Mill Alley. They did this instead of a big replace the sewer. They tried the sewer grout, and they estimate the groundwater infiltration has reduced by 2/3. And that's an estimated 11,500 gallons per day that it's not leaking into the ground. So great job for the water guys getting that stuff done.
Wow.
Go ahead. I already said that part.
I'm sorry, isn't it leaking into the pipe? What is it leaking into the pipes?
It was actually seeping out of the pipes, and they used, it was called the grout injection. They injected grout into the pipe that just basically stopped the leakage, and it worked how they expected. It was, they decided that this was more economical than having to do a full sewer line replacement down the alley. And it's working great. So
Mhm.
Could possibly see more of those, not sure. So here we go. July sales tax revenue is the June collection of the May sales tax. So the May sales tax revenue, you can see on the bright purple there, just about at the same level as 2023, which was a little bit better than I expected for May. I thought with all the snow and things, people would probably not be here. So I'm really pretty happy about that. The revenue for June is only 2.85% less than 2023. That was June 24, is just that little bit less than 2023. So I think that was a good performance for the town. I've also, I was on what we call listserv. There are a few other towns, like Craig is 3% down, Monument is 1% down, Leadville is 3% down. So I thought we were kind of falling right in the range of we're doing pretty okay at the moment. Oh, and we're at our total overall, I didn't have any place to put it on the pretty picture. Our total overall sales tax collection so far has been over 2.8 million, and that's about 70% of what we budgeted. So I think we're on track to meet the budget expectation for this year. And I don't know about anybody else, but it's busy out there. We could even surpass our budgeted expectation. So pretty excited about that. Thanks. Yeah. And now the short-term rentals were kind of a bit of a surprise. If you look at the June line there, that really dark blue one, it's 8% of total revenue, and it's 8.44% increase over 2023. So I was shocked. I'm not going to guess what's coming up, except for maybe going up. And the only thing I could think of is maybe because we had so much snow, a lot of those skiers that were coming up to ski Mary Jane, because it stayed open as long as it did, actually did stay overnight. That's my best guess. Because I was thinking May would have been a good time to not be here, but you know, there you have it. So anybody got any questions for me?
That's great, Lori. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
All right. Fraser Sanitation Settlement Funds Preference, Michael.
Thank you, Mayor. So in the packet this evening for this agenda item, I have a staff briefing that I wrote, kind of providing some of the background of this. This is in reference to an agreement that was executed October 9th of 2013 that Denver Water and the town of Fraser entered into and was ultimately signed by Peggy Smith, as far as appropriating funds to be used for water quality funds from Denver Water in exchange for water supply benefits to Denver Water. So these funds are available. They're now coming down. The allocation in 2013 was $2 million, but it was allowed to adjust with inflation. That number is estimated between $2.5 and $2.7 million to the sanitation districts in Grant County. And right now the discussion is how do we want to split that allocation of funds? There are two options that have been presented as far as how we can do that. If you look at the table in the bottom of that staff briefing, it kind of shows a 7-way split between the 7 different sanitation districts, or by if you divide it per single family equivalents per sanitation district. You'll see that with the town of Fraser's split there, it's a difference of $39,000, almost $40,000. And the question has been, as far as continued conversation with this, each sanitation district's been going to their board as far as direction how they would like to see those funds split. And that's the decision that we need for tonight to continue the conversation at the next scheduled meeting regarding this matter on July 30th with the county. So I will advocate for the Fraser Sanitation District, Town of Fraser, on behalf of you all as far as how you would like to see those funds appropriated. The 7-way split, again, just provides everything evenly to each sanitation district. I would just note that there are different requirements from each sanitation district based on the number of single-family equivalents that is in each sanitation district. Such as with our wastewater treatment plant being required to do the Project P and the Project N eventually, and those different filtration, those major capital projects. Those are because of the threshold of single-family equivalents that we serve. Compared to some of the smaller single sanitation districts that do not have to meet those requirements, such as the Tabernash Meadows Sanitation District. So happy to discuss this and just need a motion for how you would like to see these funds split. If you'd like to see them split with a 7-way split or by SFEs.
So Michael, are the SFEs derived from today's count, or is this a 2013 count when the agreement was made?
It's a good question. I don't know.
Based on the number, I'm assuming it's today or
1984 sounds like that.
we would have benefited greatly from our growth. We probably outpaced a
Right.
few of the others.
Yeah, and part of the discussion has been like the 7-way split helps support some of the sanitation districts with
Yeah.
funds they would not normally be able to see. However, because of our requirements to meet certain state filtration requirements before our wastewater is discharged back into the Fraser River, I think can help argue that higher amounts. But again, this is how the board wants to proceed.
So what happens if we all can agree? Because I can see some people that are probably not as entitled as they should be to get, that are not gonna say, oh, yeah, I'll take the lesser amount because I'm a good guy.
That's a good question. They really don't know right now.
We'll just see how.
I actually asked Catherine Morris that same question, who's kind of spearheading this issue with the county. And it's really just kind of advocating and trying to get towards like an agreement. So if you have a preference, we can say the preference. Some sanitation districts have been saying that they prefer, maybe they prefer the SFE split, but they would be okay with the 7-way if that's the direction it had to go.
It's those smaller districts, a lot of them still have small systems and a lot of expenses. And Granby, did they have to put their they put their waste back into the river, right? So I would imagine they have.
They're up in
So I'm inclined to go with the 7-way split because it's a little more equitable. Granby still gets the short end of the stick. But then the Tabernash Meadows County, and if we do the SAs.
Yeah, what I see is Tabernash Meadows and Grand County. I mean, that's yes.
Saying is that Grant County owns the Port Meadows Sanitation District, which is why they're kind of in that same bracket there. So they have like an interest and some level of ownership of that sanitation district. So that's why they're kind of split out, but yet together.
They're gonna take a huge hit.
And I don't know that it's a increase. I mean, I guess I'm not clear because those numbers that they're showing are just how with that amount, that whatever it is, 2 million would be split out if it was SFEs. It doesn't talk about individual costs that the different utilities have. Does that?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at it as a unit value, dollars per SFE. I don't have a calculator in front of me, but when you start looking at Tabernash Meadows and Grand County collectively, I mean, that's 410. You're at about $20,000 in SFE for one district, where if you're looking at, let's see, that's 3,556,000. You're below 1,000 or 2,000 per SFE on our side. You know, so the equitability, I think, is on the SFE front.
For everyone?
Yeah, yeah. Otherwise, you know, I don't know. I'm sure they could spend $700,000, but a small district, when if you were to offer them 20,000 per unit, that's a great gift.
And again, I just want to point out that there seems to be some discussions about if Grant County and Tabernash Meadows should be listed separately with an equal split option, because they're looking at one sanitation district or using one facility. It's just a level of ownership, and they're using that, I think, to their advantage for the 7-way split, even though it's one sanitation operation. That makes sense.
No, I agree with Adam. It makes more sense to look at it in the SFE and how much each district, each SFE is. It's-
I mean, is it our decision or we just have one voice and?
We're
Make
one
a
voice,
recommendation.
and I'll likely be bringing this back once we get further along.
And I think we have a strong voice because we are the plant manager.
Yeah,
I
I
agree.
prefer SFEs. It seems more fair.
Michael, did you say that Winter Park, what is it, sanitation district 1 is for the 7-way split right now?
So yeah, Grant County number 1 was, they preferred more the 7-way split. But they also said that, you know, they're obviously good with the SFBs if that's the direction they want to go. Winter Park Ranch was more focused on they voted to support the SFE split versus the 7-way split.
I mean, I'm all for being nice, but like, I just don't understand why anyone would do the 7-way split.
Well, you know, if you look at the different programs that we're working right now, between industrial pretreatment project and these new capital projects, I mean, there's a lot of things. It's an expensive operation that we're managing for the JFOC.
So this money would just go towards the general fund.
JFOC.
It would go to the
Yeah.
JFOC.
Yeah,
It goes to some
yeah.
enterprise.
And, okay.
It's dedicated funding for the treatment plant.
We need motion.
I'll make a motion to propose the SFE split. Partners.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Right.
Right, thanks. All right. Resolution 2024-0701, Bike Park Conceptual Design, and then it just has a date. Not
it's
a,
actually 2 separate resolutions.
Okay.
I just kind of put on there a little funny.
gotcha. All right, Sarah.
Oh, I said.
Good evening. We have a number of items this evening that are interrelated, connected to the Cousins Ranch open space, both in terms of the proposed Fraser Bike Park, as well as the proposed conservation easement. So with those resolutions, we've got 5 total. I've broken them into 2 different staff briefings and 1 presentation. So I'm gonna, for purposes of the flow here, gonna be jumping a little bit back and forth between the 2 different staff briefings. So with that, please feel free to stop me at any time with questions. So in terms of our discussion tonight, I want to start just with, again, a brief overview of the Fraser Recorder Master Plan and where we are at in terms of implementation of that master plan. We did review this back in the January workshop related to the bike park, so I'll try not to spend too much time just rehashing everything, but do want to provide some context there. And discuss some of the bike park updates in terms of what has happened and what we've been working on since January, as well as the revised conceptual design that we're asking you to provide your feedback and potentially approve this evening. There are 3 different resolutions related to that. So we'll go through those different resolutions. And then for the second part, discussing the proposed conservation easement. And there's 2 resolutions related to that for the second half of tonight's presentation. So the Fraser River Corridor Master Plan was published back in 2017. There was a pretty extensive community engagement process throughout kind of the end of 2016 into 2017 that took place. The master plan was funded through a grant from Great Outdoors Colorado, GOCO, and was ultimately published in April 2018. So a summary of the plan is included in the staff briefing for the conservation easement, as well as a link to the full plan. But out of that plan came 10 goals. And so it really was looking to create an implementable community-driven vision for the Cousins Ranch open space that identified open space needs, goals, and strategies to activate this underutilized 120-acre open space asset and be able to use that to kind of acquire additional funding for different projects. It was striving to build a consensus for the planning effort with the desired outcome of protecting the land, river, and wildlife while increasing river access, as well as recreational activities and educational opportunities in order to connect residents and visitors to the Fraser River, protect, connect, and inspire. Really using the Fraser River corridor as a major local and regional asset to expand the existing tourist industry and support economic diversification. As part of the GOCO concept paper that was submitted last March, really talked about, in addition to this as a recreational amenity for the community, seeing it also as an economic driver for the community. This is right kind of in the heart of Fraser. I think as great it is to have everybody come and sleep here and go use our trails, it also gives them a reason to actually be in town, stay in town. You know, hopefully they grab a burger or a beer afterwards, you know, a bagel and coffee beforehand. So really see this as an economic diversification piece and an economic driver in addition to a recreational amenity in terms of activating this space. Developing a balance between recreation and preservation. And so I think having that bike park piece alongside that conservation easement piece is really important. There were various reaches, and we'll look at those different reaches in just a second here. But goal 6 really kind of focused on activating the Lions Pond area as one of the reaches. It's already an area where we have heavy traffic. You know, people walk around the ponds, they fish, but really trying to create more of a riverside park area there, improving ADA accessibility, and having amenities that would support various user groups. Improving parking and enhancing public transportation to get to the Lions Ponds area and Cousins Ranch open space. Improving pedestrian and bicycle circulation with the creation of loop trails, and increasing user safety by minimizing conflicts between user groups, and then reducing pet waste. So just a brief kind of what has been done with this master plan implementation thus far. A pedestrian bridge went in about, I believe, the same time as this master plan was coming together, with a crossing between the Fraser River to the Lions Pond area. There was another bridge proposed at some point kind of further down the Fraser River Trail, but as I understand it and work with CPW and consultation on that, they really wanted to preserve that habitat and not have that bridge there. One of the initial pilot project from the master plan was increasing ADA accessibility around the Lions Ponds and making those trails ADA compliant. So we worked with Skinny Traffic Trails on that project. They also at that time planted a number of trees around the Lions Ponds. These are still growing, so it's not entirely evident, but are working on increasing the diversification of vegetation in that area and the shade canopy. We've completed the trail section for the Marianne's Loop Trail. So that takes the Fraser River Trail that was there and connects it into a loop going past the Lions Pond, back behind the fire station up to Rendezvous Road and back. We still have a little bit of grant money left to use for trail kiosks, some park benches, picnic tables, things like that. So we're working on getting those ordered and installed by the end of the summer. And that project. And then in the fall, the long-awaited bathrooms at the Lions Ponds finally came to fruition. And just this past week, we got a water fountain that's up and running at the bathrooms. So I think that'll be a nice amenity as well. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag here. So this kind of just shows a quick conceptual, I know it's hard to see on the screen, of the area around the Lions Ponds that was really focused on for activation of recreational amenity. A bicycle playground was one of those amenities. It's number 19, which is kind of hard to see, but adjacent to the southern pond there. You can also see a parking lot, which we are doing as part of this proposed bike project. So we have the bike parking lot concept. It's at about a 30% design level right now, is included in your packet that American Engineering moved forward. We felt that parking lot was necessary, not just for the bike park, but just for increased usage of the Lions Pond area as well. We'll continue that other parking lot back behind the buildings next to Safeway and kind of along the frontage road and by the EV chargers. But this will be a nice addition there. So last fall, we brought forward, we had a discussion with the Board of Trustees about what we should focus on next in terms of implementation. We discussed a natural playground, which we look to do in the future, an amphitheater kind of outdoor event space and some dispersed picnic tables in that area, and a bike park. So it was decided that we would put our efforts and move forward with a bike park. Once we did that, we started working with American Ramp Company. They've designed a number of different bike parks throughout Colorado. Spoke with a couple different communities that have worked with them, had a very positive experience with them. So we started working with them on that community engagement process, and we had 277 participants for an online survey. We spoke with a number of our kind of key partners and stakeholders in this area. We've had a number of conversations with Headwater Trails Alliance, with the Fraser Valley Recreation District. Both Scott Ledeen and Mira McQueen let me know before this meeting that they weren't able to attend tonight, but they are very excited and fully support this project. Scott is hoping to, or has had conversations with his board for the rec district about contributing funding towards this project. So we're hoping to get the commitment from that we can put towards this project next year and include in our grant applications. But really just, I think, an overwhelming response in favor of this. Of course, there are a few comments sprinkled in there of people not in favor, but overwhelmingly positive support. I think both from more advanced mountain bikers, the Fraser Valley Mountain Bike Coalition, Fraser River Valley Mountain Bike Coalition. They've been very involved in helping us promote, get the word out. They're eager to help fundraise as well. So we do have a lot of responses from those mountain bikers, but also just, I think, from families and parents of young kiddos that are really excited to see this. And a lot of people saying it's been missing in our community. What was also exciting to see about the initial survey is that people responding really were people that lived in Fraser and in the neighboring communities. So this was information that was presented back in January. At that time, we had a conceptual design that was shown to you that's very similar to this here. These show kind of the two different designs. The one thing that we switched was originally the bike jumps were up in this kind of, I guess, northern edge of the Lions Ponds. We asked them to move that a bit further out and keep kind of the kid-friendly amenities closer to where we're looking to have the future kind of event space there along the Lions Ponds areas. In terms of it being family friendly, that seemed like a nice amenity. Mom and dad are listening to music, kids are on the bicycle playground, and maybe getting a little more of the aggressive riding moved a bit more from that pedestrian traffic. So that's really the main change between the two designs.
I like that change.
Yeah.
Especially with pedestrian traffic.
Yeah, and one piece of feedback that we've gotten on this design is that there is kind of this bike trail that just loops and connects the bike park runs fairly close to that South Lions Pond.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can move it just a little bit, and maybe even put just like a little wooden fence right there if people feel like that helps
Definitely.
kind of separate that bike and pedestrian fishing activity.
Mm-hmm.
The design grown, as we discussed in January, I think from kind of the initial kid-friendly bicycle playground concept. What we heard was that people really just, a lot of different voices saying this was something that would be a great amenity for the community in terms of recreation, in terms of it being an economic driver. I've heard it thrown out there that Winter Park Fraser is the mountain bike capital of the world. Like, you need a town bike park, to be able to do that. We trestle as being a great option for more advanced riders, but we repeatedly heard that the county lacked that progression of skills and being able to take those beginner riders and have some beginner and intermediate features for them to be able to build up and utilize something like Trestle or even Granby Ranches Bike Park. So that's what we focused on. I think it's still very much in the spirit of the master plan. The other comment that we've repeatedly heard is for our kiddos up here, as well as a lot of them visiting the valley, they're going to outgrow this initial bicycle playground super quick. And so having this kind of more intermediate skills area is going to be really important for the kiddo progression. We've had some comments asking for more advanced bike features, for more jumps. As much as we'd love to provide that for all levels of riders, we have kept the focus largely on that beginner intermediate progression. I think that's in the spirit with the master plan. And I think it also just, we have limited space. And so in terms of utilizing that limited space, I had a great conversation with Bob Holmes, who is with us online from Trestle Bike Park and the Winter Park Resort. They're very excited to support this project as well, and kind of echo that sentiment that this is a great asset for the community and in providing that kind of beginner intermediate piece, to build up mountain bike skills and be able to ride our surrounding trails and feel comfortable going to a place like Trestle and utilizing more advanced features. So with that, I will pause for questions or discussion. Unless you want me to move to the budget slide before we do that.
I just had a question. Did the rec district contribute to Winter Park's skate park?
I do not offhand know the answer to that question. Yeah, that I can find out.
Okay.
Yeah, but the rec district's been very excited about this project from the beginning. I've had a number of conversations with Scott, and he's been very supportive, both in helping this get off the ground and providing insight, and helping with fundraising, and then also agreeing to take on maintenance. And so I think we're hoping that there can be a collaboration between Fraser, the rec district, and Trestle for maintenance of this bike park. The Mountain Bike Alliance is also interested in helping with that. And so I think we're going to have a lot of, eager volunteers on the ground, as well as that more structured, formal maintenance umbrella. It's exciting.
All right, keep rolling.
All right. There any feedback anyone else would like to provide?
I would love to.
Does the board mind if we allow for community?
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you have to come up,
Come
you have
on
to
up and
introduce
introduce
yourself
yourself.
and keep it to 3 minutes.
Yeah, I don't really plan on coming up here. Hi, my name is Monique Iannuzzi, and I own a house right above this proposed bike park. So I guess my question to you is I'm one of the closest houses that will clearly be affected by the noise and things like that. And I never did receive any type of outreach as far as communication or for my feedback. And I'm probably one of the most affected by this. And so I'm just wondering, I heard her say that you guys are eventually going to plan on expanding this. And it seems just from what I've seen online that this is pretty set in stone. I'm just curious, is there a reason why you guys put it so close to the residences when everything around, like the bike parks and the playgrounds, are on the resident side of this entire thing instead of maybe on the Highway 40 side, where it would be less impactful for the amphitheater and the bike park and the playgrounds? Is this a time to ask these sort of questions? Because I feel like I ever.
I don't know if you know that 40 is on the bottom part of this map, right? And then the Fraser River's on the other side of it, and then it goes up the hill.
Right, and
Yeah.
I'm up the hill, so I'm just on the other side of the Fraser River from
So
this.
where would we put it if it wasn't gonna go here?
So, I mean, if there's 120 acres, I'm just curious why it wouldn't be like,
It's all wetlands. It's all part of these reaches and wetlands. We have this one section that we're able to work with. That's region 6, reach 6. So that's a big part of it, why we're just working in this area, not further south.
so you're saying that for the next pond, I don't even know what the official word is for those old ponds.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a little bit hard to,
Okay.
um,
But that's good for time in terms of park hours and if we're gonna have lighting and close it at night and, you know, to help with that. Anyway, good. Thank you, Monica.
is that, are we?
That's it.
Are you
Mhm.
gonna show that maps or?
Yeah, you're not gonna.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, so reach 6 that we kept referring to, is this area by the Lions Ponds and Safeway area. So this is the area that was designated within the master plan for activation and increased recreational amenities. So I was not here and wasn't involved in that process in terms of how that was determined. My understanding is there was already activity here around the Lions Ponds area. And then as Katie has indicated, the rest of this along the Fraser River really is wetlands. And we actually have a conversation coming up about a proposed conservation easement on that area. But the master plan designated this area for activation. As you can see, it's all kind of on the one side of Highway 40. I mean, that's the Cousins Ranch open space that's owned by the town. And the rest of it was designated to really kind of remain in its natural state, you know, maybe with some increased trail amenities and things like that, or additional picnic benches, compostable toilets, things like that around the different ponds areas and along the trails.
And there probably will never be lighting there, judging from our hopefully moving forward towards dark sky compliant community. So I can't imagine that we would take the money and try to light that up and have people complaining like they do about the tubing hills. So
Yeah, I mean, there's not in our current plans. I would think, and hopefully I'm not misspeaking, that the bike park specifically is not going to have more noise than the Highway 40 that's right next to it. So someone who knows more about sound engineering can correct me if I'm wrong there, but.
And just so that the public knows, the master plan for this was a public process. And we did spend over a year collecting information and delineating these stretches of river. This specific portion is not a natural state. That whole area has been filled. It's not natural substrate or anything like that. So it is the logical place to, if you're going to do any kind of building or whatever, and not alter other places that are in a natural state. So that's always been envisioned, and as a developable area for amenities like this, and it was a public process creating the master plan that we're trying to fulfill at this time. So.
Did you guys only make this known to Fraser residences?
You know, I don't know that detail. I would imagine there's a surrounding area that, you know, within a 3-mile plan or something like that, but I have no idea.
Quick comment. So I'm Jennifer Anderson. I live in Fraser, and I just wanted to say I think Sarah has done a fabulous job with this project, and I think that this is going to be a huge asset to the community, especially because it's free and we have a lot of other recreational facilities, but a lot of them cost money. And so I see this as a huge asset to the community and for everyone, teens, you know, young adults, tourists, but everyone alike. I love that there's a place we can all kind of come together and have a sense of community. Also, just as a reminder, the lottery funds outdoor recreation facilities across the entire state of Colorado. So there's conservation trust funds available through the county potentially, as well as GOCO grants, outdoor equity grants through CPW. So like, I think that there is a lot of potential opportunity for grant funds out there. A lot of them require matching dollars, but these are the things that we've seen the lottery fund across Colorado. So it's like the perfect type of project. So that's all I have.
Great, thanks. All right, anybody online? Raise your hand if you want to speak right now. All right, we'll keep moving.
Yeah.
No, we got one. All right, Gavin.
Somebody from Northwest Arkansas here. Travel out there pretty frequently. Just wanted to add on that. There's a ton of federal grants out there as well, that are worth looking into. This is a great project. Support it. Enjoy to see it come to light. Thanks.
Great, thank you. All right, go ahead, Sarah.
All right, and I realized I probably could have gone through a few more slides before opening that up, but moving right along. So we did put out a survey with the QR code on the current design. And we've been promoting that at Picnic in the Park. We've had it up on our social media. As of last Friday, when this packet was put together, we had about 100, we had 100 respondents. I think there's now closer to 150. But at the time this presentation was put together, it was almost 90% that said they either loved or liked the design. Again, a number of positive comments saying that this would be a really great addition to the community. And in asking which features of the bike park do you find most appealing, really just support for a variety of features. Again, that poor little kid's bicycle playground, I think always weighs the lowest on these surveys, but I trust that is because it is not the 4 and 5-year-olds filling out the survey. So I think we should keep that one in, but a number of people just talking about traveling to different bike parks and really just seeing this as an essential amenity as part of our tourist economy, and particularly just with the emphasis on mountain biking in the community. And again, we have taken into consideration a lot of feedback. I've already checked back with American Ramp Company on some of the different comments. There were some limitations with this space. A portion of it is within the FEMA 1% chance of flood, which means over 100-year period, there's a 1% chance here, 1% chance each year that this could flood. That means that we are not allowed to have more than a half-foot net rise of earth when they build it. So that has constrained where they can put different things and what they can do. So for example, there was an ask for progressive drops. We don't have the elevation. The net rise kind of affects that. But overall, we've received definitely much more positive feedback versus negative comments. With that, I'll bring us to the estimated budget. There is one change in here from what was in your packet. I had reached out to American Ramp Company because the price of the jumps had jumped up quite a bit from the last time I spoke with them. And I updated this in the presentation, but don't seem to have pulled up the corrected presentation. So the jump lines would actually be 265,876 versus that 319. It brings the total project total for the bike park specific items to just over $1 million. And the total for the overall project, if you include the parking lot, bearing the power lines, things like landscaping, to close to 1.8 million. Some of these numbers will still change a bit. They are estimates at this time. We need to still kind of think about things like irrigation that might be needed for maintenance of the bike park. But the bike park numbers themselves, if we were to move forward with American Ramp Company, this is more or less what we should be looking at. As Jen was saying, GoCo is a great source for this. We did apply last March after the January workshop, and the feedback we got was extremely positive. They thought it was a great project. They were really impressed with the level of community engagement around it, with the range of stakeholders and partners that have come into the project and have been involved. They wanted to make sure we were working with CPW and that CPW was on board with the project, and we had a lot of pending funding. So they encouraged us to come back at a future cycle because we didn't have other funding lined up. It was seen as not as shovel ready as some other projects. We're also applying in their third grant cycle of their fiscal year when they had the least amount of money left. So it was just a really competitive cycle. This is the parking lot preliminary design. Again, I feel like it's hard to see up there, and I don't know how much this means to most of you, but it's at about 30%. So we're working with Merrick on that.
Were there like 30 parking spaces?
No, I know this number.
17.
I can't.
What does it say?
I think it's 17.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like it's in the 15 to 20 range. It's not a huge space we're working with, so it'll help supplement what's elsewhere in the area. We're hoping that given that it's a bike park, particularly for Fraser residents, that at least a good chunk of people will be biking to the bike park, but do need to provide some parking. Yeah. So with that, that brings us to 3 different resolutions under consideration for tonight. The first one, resolution 2024-0701, authorizing town staff to move forward with the proposed Fraser Bike Park conceptual design. If we approve this as the overlaying design, American Ram Company will move forward with kind of creating 3D visuals and the finalized kind of the engineering pieces for that. It will allow us to start seeking funding. So I can show to GoCo that this has been approved. We also want to start just fundraising, working with the mountain bike group and our other partners to fundraise. So that allows us to say this is more or less what we're looking at. Some of the things we've talked about, moving that one trail along the ponds a little bit. I would like to work on maybe spicing up some of the amenities in the children's playground, making them a little more exciting. I think we can do something more than the rings. You know, we've talked about mountain peaks, or, you know, someone's got a tunnel that's a Colorado flag. So those sorts of changes we can still work and make. But authorizing this resolution would allow us to kind of move forward and start those next steps.
Sarah? I'm
Yes.
sorry. When you started talking parking, it just made me start thinking about traffic in general, and that it's on a one-way road right now. Is that going to be two-way, or
There are-
or the intersection develop, or there? How does this play out, I guess? I mean,
I know there are plans to make that two-way down the road. I think it's discussed both in the master plan, and I think CDOT has some plans for that as well. If you make it two-way, you maybe lose some of that parking along that frontage road, but I do believe that is the plan moving forward, that eventually that would be a two-way road.
okay.
Yeah, that's part of CDOT's capacity increase on Highway 40. It's actually part of that frontage road, just increase to widen the road a little bit and make it two-way traffic.
Okay, but we would two-way it up to that parking lot from Safeway. And then it would just be one way for.
It would be two-way.
two-way
For
from
the
the
whole,
highway.
and
The
like
whole,
to the
whole thing
intersection
would be
with
right in
the
by
bank.
And they're gonna
Yeah,
put a
but
light in.
potential light there.
And
With the potential
and
light.
eventually later you'll like it.
Right.
Okay, that's kind of what I was
And I think,
looking for, is the bigger picture.
I think Paul wants to get this parking lot in first so that the road moves
Doesn't
this
determine
way.
what-
Yeah, doesn't,
Right.
yeah, it doesn't shrink our parking lot.
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
good idea.
It's a bit of strategy involved there.
Okay, so the outer road.
And the parking lot's gonna be great too, because people can see it, they can pull off the highway and have a place to park. They'll go, "Oh, look." Right down there.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to go through?
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 2024-0701 bike park conceptual design and
A second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
I.
Any opposed? All right, that one carries.
All right. Moving right along, resolution number 2024-0702. So as I stated, GoCo was very positive about our application, but we were showing a lot of pending funding that was still needed. I think our application to GoCo, they don't have a specific match requirement like a lot of grants do, but that is something that they're weighing in terms of the community investment in the project. So we do have a number of different grants we're looking at applying for in addition to GoCo. GoCo would be the big one. And that deadline is coming up. I have to submit that concept paper by August 1st. And then if we are invited to apply, that application would be due later in September. So it does precede kind of the town's finalized budget, which we'll have later in the fall. But if we are able to show a commitment of an additional $150,000 from the fiscal year 2025 budget, staff does believe that that just makes our grant applications much stronger and helps us reach that kind of funding goal that we ultimately need to fund the project. So that is resolution number 2024-0702.
So I move to approve resolution 2024-0702, the resolution authorizing funds for the Fraser Park Bike Park.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Resolution number 2024-0703, a resolution authorizing the town manager enter into an agreement with Headwater Trails Alliance regarding bike park funding. So in your packet, you do have a copy of this agreement. Headwater Trails Alliance, as a nonprofit 501c3 entity, has the ability to receive certain funds that the town might not be able to receive. As a municipality, we can apply to GOCO, but there can be other funds out there that require a 501c3 entity to receive those funds. So this agreement just states that we're partnering with them, that they would receive those funds. We are going to set up a bike park fund. So once HTA receives those funds, they pass them to us. It goes into that fund, into that account, and then we use that to pay for bike park related expenses. It also, as a private fundraising endeavor, if individuals or businesses want to contribute, they potentially get that tax exempt status for their donation if it's going to a 501c3. So that's what that agreement outlines. And again, it just kind of expands our ability to fundraise and go after grants for the project.
So I'm assuming that Kent reviewed that contract, that agreement?
Kent wrote it. Yeah, Kent
Okay,
wrote it, and
great.
HTA is on board and happy
Perfect.
to sign it. So, and
That's
again,
our
they've just
attorney.
been great advocates for the project and willing to take this on.
Cool.
And I think it'll be important to have a broad net for this funding, and it's something
Mhm.
that we can replicate for the next phases for like the playground and the amphitheater type of thing for the future projects for the site.
So question going back to the maintenance, once it gets built and everything.
Mhm.
So who's gonna take care of it and how are we gonna pay for that? Are we gonna charge for usage of the
No.
bike park? Okay. So who's gonna pay for maintenance? Is the town on the hook for paying for maintenance ongoing for the bike park?
So the discussions we've had thus far is that it would be an intergovernmental agreement between ourselves and the rec district. More recently, we've been talking to Trestle, and they seem eager to be involved and help with that as a way, seeing it as a benefit to the community and something that they can contribute. They currently provide maintenance work for the Ruby Hill Bike Park down in Denver. They're involved in that project. So that is where we are at. But my understanding is that the rec district would be helping, or the rec district would be helping with that. Those are the conversations that we've had.
Does Bob Holm have anything to contribute to this discussion?
How much does it cost to get a trestle?
Oh, it's
You
pricey.
know that?
560 for a seat.
In daily usage?
As if you rent a bike and gear and armor and.
That's what you're-
And this will be free
I
because
know it's a different animal, but
it's a total.
Yeah.
different
you
animal.
know, we need to think about making the maintenance, maintaining it, and who's gonna do that, and who's gonna pay for it.
Yeah, and we've had those. Oh, it looks like Bob Home has raised his hand.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for unmuting me, and thank you to the board for going through and listening at this. I'm a huge supporter of this type of thing. To specifically answer the question, the maintenance of the park will not be a significant undertaking. With the design that's currently proposed with the wooden ramp features, there's some landing surfaces that would need to be taken care of, some general upkeep of the material, but not a significant amount of work. And at Ruby Hill, we work with Denver Parks and Rec to support their team, both with making sure that they have access to come up to Trestle to ride, to engage them in what we do, and then also a little bit of financial support. And I don't want to speak for Sky and what we can specifically provide, but some of the ideas that Sarah and I and Scott were talking about this morning is, our Trestle Trail crew is always excited to be helping out the community, and if we can split time with some of their time being at Trestle Bike Park, and then also extending their time and experience for training and on site at this facility would be tremendous. So I think there's a lot that can be supported, and this is an integral part of what we do as a bike community, and I'm a big supporter. So appreciate all the engagement on this.
And I'll just add, the Mountain Bike Alliance group has eagerly offered to help with volunteer hours and things like that for some of the maintenance work.
Is there a program at the resort, kind of like ski school, where they actually teach people how to ride?
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
so it seems like that would be a good partnership between what we're doing and what the resort's doing.
Yeah, that's why we're talking to Bob, because he's with the resort there. And the rec district has said, my daughter's actually been in mountain bike camp this week through the rec district. And they go up in the St. Louis Creek area and use those trails. But I think this would be a great amenity for that group as well.
I'd entertain a motion to approve resolution 2024-0703, authorizing the town manager to enter into an agreement with Headwaters Trail Alliance regarding bike park funding.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, another motion carries.
Great, thank you.
Sarah.
So I will move right along to discussions regarding a potential conservation easement on portions of the Cousins Ranch open space. So this is related to resolution 2024-0704, which would authorize town staff to move forward with the pursuit of a conservation easement on portions of the Cousins Ranch open space and to enter into an MOU with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, committing to the pursuit of that easement. So. Sorry. That's okay. I'll bring it back.
So the bottom line is, we can't build a bike park and get approval from DO or was it DOW without having this in place?
CPW, Colorado Parks and Wildlife.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
as we've worked with Colorado Parks and Wildlife on consultation on design on this project, we've worked to maintain certain buffers between the bike park and the Fraser River and between the bike park and the willows. The willows around there are important breeding habitat or nesting habitat for a number of different birds. There's moose in the area. As we know, this past winter, there were a lot of moose incidents along the Fraser River Trail. So this is first and foremost in the front of CPW's mind as they're working with us on this project. And we're talking about kind of increased recreational activities in this area. And as we've been talking with them, we've really talked about how this Reach 6 has been indicated in the plan to be activated with recreational amenities, whereas the rest of it, we put in the trail loop, a few trail amenities, but we're really planning to preserve this in its natural state. They want to ensure that that is also the vision of the town 10, 20 years from now, and that doesn't change. So they have requested that we look into a conservation easement to kind of ensure in perpetuity. Right now it's zoned as open space. So what you can do in that activity, this shows the different reaches a little bit better. What you can do in that zone doesn't change so much at this point, but it just ensures that it remains as such into the future. So we have the Lions Pond area, and then we've been in conversations with reaches 5 through 3, which would go from south of that Lions Pond area up above these ponds and then down to Rendezvous Road. So that's the area that we are looking at. We continue to work with our different partners and stakeholders to make sure we have provisions in that conservation easement to be able to continue to have it usable for recreation, and that we can continue to build out the master plan and with the different amenities per the master plan. So that is a negotiation process that we would be engaged in. CPW has found a number of conservation values in the area per the data that they have on different species that are immediately there or in the surrounding area. And so that brings us to the two different resolutions. We've had initial conversations with Colorado Headwaters Land Trust about working with them to put the conservation easement on this. Those initial conversations have been positive. Jeremy, the executive director, is here with us today if anybody has questions about that process or what that would look like. This has gone in front of the Planning Commission. And they voted unanimously in favor of resolution number. Like I skipped over that somehow. Oh, there we go. They voted unanimously in support of Planning Commission Resolution 2024-0602, recommending that the Fraser Board of Trustees explore options to place the conservation easement on portions of the Cousins Ranch open space. So again, it really doesn't change how this property and this land is currently being used. CPW's concern is that there is increasingly more and more development in the valley, and so everything is reaching more of a tipping point in each piece of development. So as we're having these conversations with them saying, we're just looking to activate this portion, they want assurances that, that plan doesn't change 10 years from now, which I think is a fair assurance to ask for. So the MOU with CPW, if we were to sign it, commits us to exploring this possibility and moving forward. If we choose to work with Headwaters on this initiative, we would continue to negotiate the conservation easement, and that would be brought back in front of the board for approval once we were ready to do that. But it would be a process probably about a year to go through all the different steps that it takes to put a conservation easement into place. But that MOU shows our commitment, and it allows them to feel comfortable answering in a positive manner regarding impacts to wildlife and the mitigations that we're taking to balance out those impacts to wildlife as we move forward with not just the bike park, but a potential playground, a potential amphitheater, basically any recreational amenity in that area.
So is there a map in here that delineates the conservation easement versus open space?
Yeah, and I apologize if
What's allowed where? So in a conservation easement, are you allowed to have a bike park and amphitheater and all that, or is that going to be open
we
space?
could, you can, and again, Jeremy can speak to this more than I can. But we, for simplicity's sake, are looking to keep Reach 6, which has the bike park and the amenities, out of the conservation easement. So we are looking at these green areas from Reach 5 down to Rendezvous Road at the end of Reach 3. So that is the open space, but we are able to provide provisions for those recreational amenities. And with that, I will let Jeremy add his expertise.
Oh, well, that's lovely. Yeah, that is different. The red part is actually commercial, isn't it?
That's business. So that is not town owned
It's
land.
privately owned, yeah.
Yeah, that's owned by, Grand County #1 owns the 2 ponds there, for which we have some acre feet for augmentation. So yeah, that's all private property there in the red. Everything that you're seeing that we look to be put into a conservation easement is currently open space, with, trails going through that, signage, benches. I think there's some utilities that go through there. And those are just things that we just need to maintain with the conservation easement so that we can service those items.
And are you proposing to put a bridge in between that south pond
No,
across the river?
no.
Well, okay.
CPW said no more bridges.
Well, that's what's on this. That's what's on that other map.
There's an existing bridge that was put there.
Yeah, there's.
Yeah, there was a proposed bridge, but my understanding is in working with CPW on that bridge previously, CPW did not want that bridge and the town honored that.
Okay.
Because they wanted to keep that as critical wildlife habitat.
No, I
not
agree, but on the map, it's shown as a bridge, proposed bridge crossing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, sorry, this map was just taken from the master plan. This is not an official conservation easement map.
Sorry, go ahead. You.
I'll answer the brief question there, and I've learned presenting in, well, Jeremy Crones, I'm the executive director of Colorado Headwaters Land Trust.
Go.
I'm formerly a resident of Grand Lake, but I've been living in Fraser as I rebuild my house. So I still have a stake in this. I've learned in presenting to municipal boards that I answer only questions asked to me. I don't offer information. So speaking of development, any type of development on conservation easements is strongest when there is minimal impact on the landscape. And so if you want the bike park to intrude on the land that will be a conservation easement, do that now. Conservation easements are in perpetuity. And it is very difficult to amend, change, and especially to remove a conservation easement. All of those have to be done through legal bounds. To remove a conservation easement at any time requires a court order, and you have to prove that the conservation values are no longer being supported. That usually happens when there's a natural disaster, such as a hurricane. Wildfires often don't count in that. And there's another thing there, right? Conservation easements are negotiable until they're signed. And so anything that the landowner wants, whether it's a town or a private citizen or anybody else, the door is open until we actually meet at the notary's office to sign the document. And then all of those barriers come into place where, like I said earlier, it's really difficult to amend. So this does take a lot of foresight and a lot of forethought to process.
So things like the lunch loop, the cross-country ski trail, that we could negotiate
Pre-existing.
that.
Yep. Yeah, and that will come out early in our conversations. You know, what Sarah and I have talked about, and Michael, kind of a list of everything that exists on the property now, and that's the baseline. That's where we're going to start.
And recreation and education, both legitimate conservation values to be protected. So those kind of trails and loops are, well, I don't know if you're specifically seeking them, but
Sure.
but some organizations do
Right.
seek these kind of situations.
GoCo, certainly, I can't speak for GoCo, but GoCo definitely prioritizes natural recreation and educational in that way. As a land trust, we are an accredited land trust with a Land Trust Alliance. We respond effectively to every level of government up to the IRS, and the IRS classifies legitimate conservation values, historical significance, agricultural open space, educational open space, scenic open space, and water. I think that is the last category. And so if you can make a legitimate argument to any of those, it counts. And this definitely does.
Yeah.
So we could
Probably
maybe
all
just
five.
Carve out that area, leave it open space, and then everything else move into conservation easement.
Carve out which area?
The bike
The
park.
bike path park.
Yeah,
Correct, yeah. And the conservation area, again, it is the open space. Just the open space is a zoning, and the zoning could be changed by a future board. So our future planning commission. So this ensures that this remain open space, basically.
Ensure that some subsequent board's not going to reverse it.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, we act as a land trust, we act kind of as a neutral third party.
Right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think when we asked you about a conservation easement last time, it was around 30,000 plus or minus 5.
Sure.
I forget.
For due diligence, so the process of a conservation easement, as Sarah said, could take roughly a year, depending how complex it is. It could take a lot longer. The due diligence, which is generally an appraisal, survey if necessary, baseline report, environmental report, mineral report, title documentation. Talk to Kent, he's done it before himself. That could run up to $65,000 or $70,000. However, don't get too scared, because the voters of this county have overwhelmingly approved open lands, rivers, and trails funding. That was the OLRT vote just last fall that reiterated what we had voted on in 2016. The county knows this and sees that, and we at the Land Trust have been very successful in those grants. The county has supported the due diligence that we've requested, as well in subsequent funding when necessary.
Right.
I can't guarantee it, but don't get scared.
And Jeremy,
Yes.
some of those requirements may not be necessary.
Correct.
Because we're not a tax and we're not taxable. We don't
Right.
pay taxes. And so a lot of those things are based on the tax implications of donating a conservation easement. So some of those things should fall out. But some of them should be done for just due diligence sake.
For due
as well.
diligence
Yeah.
and knowing how the state works with CPW and GOCO, just be careful at what strings come with those requests.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. I will offer, if you do have any other questions, my office is in Granby. You're welcome to contact me at any time and I will answer any of your inquiries. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to make a motion, resolution 20, to approve resolution 2024 0704 pursuit of a Cousins Ranch Conservation Easement and CPW MOU.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
And I'd
Nah.
like to make a motion to approve resolution 2024-0705, authorizing Colorado Headwaters Land Trust application for Cousins Ranch conservation easement.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
this is very exciting stuff.
It's all very exciting and good work.
Yes. All right, we are now on item F, resolution 2024-07. No, we're not. We're on G. Victoria Village Financial Strategies and Risk Evaluation, Hilltop Securities.
That's you guys. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Or a bailiff.
And so that the presentations in the packet, we bring that up.
That's really exciting stuff.
And I'd like to introduce you guys, once they're done signing in, of course. I'd like to introduce to Jason Simmons and Maddie. Maddie, I don't know if I can pronounce your last name.
Radonovic.
Radonovic, there you go. And we've been working with them with Hilltop Securities as the town's financial municipal advisor. And looking at this, the current deal that we're looking at for Victoria Village, how we can approach these different things with financial strategies in addition to some other projects that we're looking at. But they've been very helpful, and Maddie was able to attend the board retreat, and this is kind of a continuation from that work and that discussion. And I'll hand it off to you.
Great, thank you. Well, thanks for having us here tonight to talk about this. And again, you met my colleague Maddie last month when she was talking about financing other kind of capital improvements and focused a lot on COPs. This is not focusing on COPs. We'll talk about a little bit why that is. But again, I'm Jason Simmons, Maddie Radonovic, work for Hilltop Securities. And what we do is we serve as a municipal advisor to Colorado municipalities. Everything from the state of Colorado down to cities and counties and special districts across the state. And in that role, we help them finance capital projects. And that is our main focus of what we do here in Colorado. And as Michael said, the town hired us early this year, primarily to assist in the evaluation of the Victoria Village project, taking a look at the potential impact it may have on the town's finances, particularly in relation to other capital projects that are on the horizon, including that public works facility that is a needed facility for the town. We are not housing experts, we are financing experts. So, you have other housing experts on this team. Our understanding is that you've conducted some demand analysis to kind of lay out the demand for this project. So we're taking a look at the assumptions that went into the financial model and taking a look at that and making sure that we feel this is a financial proposal that can move forward and eventually get done in the public markets under a municipal type structure, as opposed to a kind of a private structure. And we're having these conversations with many of our clients these days, everything from Front Range communities to other mountain communities, as kind of this middle market housing is a big topic for many of our clients. We did review the preliminary cash flow model prepared by MAD for building C&E.
Hey, Antoinette, can you bring up the presentation?
Let me shoot forward a couple slides. Yeah, slide 2. And what we did is we took a look at some of the parameters that were modeled in here, including projected debt service coverage and really kind of the funding commitment of the town that is kind of outlaid in this model. This is a model that is fortunate to have other funding sources, which is allowing this structure to be done. And we'll get into a little bit more with I would say a limited additional support from the town. The impact of the project on the town really kind of depends on the direct monetary support the town would contribute to this project. The source and use, which we touch on a little bit towards the end of the presentation, right now is anticipating about $2.9 million coming from the town towards upfront costs of the project. And the financial model assumes about $250,000 a year being contributed to the project over the next 16 years from 2026 to 2041. Any further participation from the town would start to depend on any other financing structure we needed to kind of maybe bring the interest rate down or other financing objectives of the town to help maybe manage, do a little better of managing the median household income of the AMI level targets that they're looking for this project. The current financial model assumes a 6.25% interest rate, which we think is reasonable given this financial support that the town is committing. Again, we've had conversations with other clients where they might take on a little bit more risk and bring that interest rate down, but because of some of these upfront sources that are currently used, that this is able to survive with just a 6.2% interest rate. As an assumption right now, that won't be set until this transaction gets to the market, which is probably sometime next year. But we think that's a reasonable interest rate assumption, given the financial support of the town where we are with that.
And Jason, can you talk about your discussions with Stiefel as well?
Yes.
Like with that.
So, the town has executed an engagement letter with Stiefel. Stiefel is a firm similar to ours. Stiefel would serve as the underwriter on this transaction. So they would be the ones working with us that would help go and present this transaction to the investor base and go and set the interest rates. So we have had conversations with them multiple times related to this project. And we do work with Stiefel a lot on a lot of other projects around the state. So we have a good rapport with Stiefel and a good working relationship with them. So one of the questions that still will need to be decided over the next year or so is who will be the issuer of these bonds? As a statutory town, the town of Fraser is not allowed to issue certificates of participation for housing. You can issue certificates of participation for other projects. We have many other statutory town clients that do that, but you cannot do it for housing projects. So that means as a result, the project will need to rely on a different entity to issue housing revenue bonds that will be solely secured by the revenues of that project, in addition to the $250,000 that might be coming from the town. So there are kind of 3 structures that could be used as the issuer there. One would be the Fraser Housing Authority. We need a little bit more diligence there to make sure that the Fraser Housing Authority can issue bonds for what this is considered to be a middle income housing project. Typically, those statutory housing authorities are more geared toward traditional low income. Yes.
I have a question. So would the housing authority need to own the property?
Yes, that would
Okay.
be realistic. That the
So
housing
we'd have to
authority-
transfer ownership from the town of Fraser to the housing authority?
Yes, that would be the assumption.
Okay.
There's some legal nuances that will still need to be worked out depending on who the issuer will be. We'll need to have some legal clarity from those certain things, and some of it will tie into ultimately there'll be a mortgage on the project, to serve as additional credit support for the loan. Okay, so one would be the Fraser Housing Authority. Legal clarification needs to be to see if that can be the issuer. The other could be the Fraser River Valley Housing Partnership or the state of Colorado's Middle Income Housing Authority. Those are all authorities that could likely be the issuer for this. And depending on really the nature of who the issuer is not really going to impact the structure of the financing or the risk profile to the town. So each of those would generally kind of serve as the issuer under the structure that we are contemplating right now. And as I said, as just a second ago on this last bullet, it is assumed that the bonds will be secured by a mortgage on the property. And that's kind of the downside risk of this situation, is that because there's going to be a mortgage on that property, if the property did not perform, there would be a risk that that could be sold and paid off for the investors. And that's a risk profile from that perspective. No additional financial risk to the town, other than probably likely having to continue to pay that $250,000 a year and that upfront cost. It'd be more of a reputational risk of the town that that project might not be town owned or owned by that authority anymore if there was underperformance of it.
And Jason, can you talk a little bit about the town's ability or the housing authority's ability to issue tax exempt revenue bonds versus maybe a private developer's approach to this type of thing?
So that 6%, 6.25% interest rate, well, it is high. That is a tax exempt rate. This would be considered a non-rated transaction. So that's why that would be in that 6.5% interest rate. If the town were to issue COPs, like for example, if you were to issue COPs in the spring for your public works facility, we would expect that to be in the 4.5% range. But those are tax exempt rates. So if these were to be done in the private market, that interest rate would probably be at least 200 to 300 basis points or 2 to 3% higher. So you're probably looking at an 8 to 9% interest rate if this was done in the private markets. Additionally, a lot of these projects are done with equity, which requires even higher return than that 8 to 9%. So the benefit of this being issued through the municipal sector is that tax exempt lower interest rate.
Can you refinance that at some point?
Yes. So these would be, right now, we would assume these would be sold with a 10-year call. So you wouldn't be able to do anything for 10 years. In year 10, you could refinance them. And the ability to do so and the economics of that will really be dependent on two things. Really, one is the interest rate environment that we would be in 10 years from now. And then the other would be really the status of the project and how the project is going. Is it performing as expected? You know, if it's performing as expected, you would hope that you could refinance there at a lower interest rate. Because obviously right now, this ramp up phase, you've got construction risk and ramp up phase, where in year 10, you've got an operating mature property. So hopefully you can bring that interest rate down just by the nature of that project. So it really is going to depend on those two things, where we are on an interest rate cycle and then kind of where the project is in terms of its meeting its projections.
But you'd have to call the bonds.
Yes.
Can you shorten the call period, maybe?
You can. It gets a little bit more expensive. So instead of maybe you'd have a 6.25% rate, maybe it goes up to a 6.35 or 6.40. So you can do that. In this non-rated sector, it's a little bit more of a game time decision because we just have to take the temperature of the investors at the time. But yes, you can, but it would require a higher interest rate than what a 10-year call would be.
So putting the infrastructure in, we have a grant, so we're not going to be going to the bond market then. So when do you foresee if we actually start breaking ground? Is that when, right before you break ground, you go to the bond market, or?
Yeah, I mean, we've had this conversation with other clients. I think the sensitivity of these cash flows is very sensitive to interest rates or other funding gaps that could arise. So we would, once you get all again, we have a sources page back here based on the most recent model. There are other sources of funding that kind of need to be locked down. So once you get all those locked down, we would go to the market and try and do it all at the same time, as opposed to start funding up front and with the risk that interest rates move up significantly 6 months from now, and therefore it creates a bigger funding gap. We would kind of say, put everything tight together, and we kind of go to the market right about when you want to break ground. We would need about 90 days to get a transaction done.
Well, it sort of looks like interest rates might be going down, so it could be.
You know, the market has priced in already kind of 3 reductions by the Fed so far. You know, the current expectation is that there will be 3 between now and the end of the year, which is a lot because I think there's only 3 meetings left. You know, and they're only talking about really the short term, you know, that's the overnight rates. Longer term rates really are kind of in I'd say on the upper end of a 20-year range. They're not as high as I think, you know, the muni market is not as high as people think, like by taking a proxy for the mortgage market. Mortgage rates are higher, but we're issuing clients, you know, issuing debt for clients. We're in this mid-4 range for a lot of our clients, which again is probably on the higher end of a 20-year range. We're not outside of that range. So that's kind of where we are. Yes, we're a lot higher than we were 2 years ago, but nobody thinks we're going back to where we were in 21 and early 22. Any other questions? So we'll talk about a little bit of risks to the town. So again, if if the current thought process really kind of carries through, which is upfront cash being contributed for some of these upfront project costs, and then a contribution of $250,000 a year, that's really the legal financial risk to the town is needing to make those continued commitments. If there was no other credit support by the town, the long-term performance of the project isn't necessarily going to impact the financials of the town, because investors would not legally be able to come after the town for additional financial obligations. There could be some type of a reputational risk if there is a project within the town of Fraser that is not performing, where the town may feel that they have an obligation to help kind of bail that out, but it would not be a legal financial risk. It would more be something that you would want to take a look at if you felt that you wanted to still control this property in the future. And again, because this credit support is not really going to be direct for this financing, it's not really going to be on your town's financials. It's not going to be in your ACFR, and therefore it wouldn't really impact your potential credit rating for other financings that you may need in the future. There are other credit support features that could be used that we have to work with other clients and examined with other clients that could help bring that interest rate down. But again, given some of these upfront sources of funds, we don't think that's necessary to get this project done at this time. Again, as long as all these uses of funds materialize as currently proposed. One of the things we were asked to kind of take a look at was project equity. And equity in these kind of projects really kind of comes in two different forms. One is annual excess cash flow. The other would be kind of the ownership of this project in the long run. This is right now anticipated to be a 30, potentially 40-year financing. So the ability to kind of have this mortgage free is not going to materialize for many years. The excess cash flows of this project really don't start flowing back to the authority until for about 20 years. So I don't think the town should be looking at this as an equity play in the near term. There might be something in the long term that benefits it. But again, there's a lot of factors that need to play into that in terms of long-term performance of the project and kind of where we are in kind of the economic and the interest rate cycle 15 to 20 years down the road. And so this last slide is the pro forma. And again, this is based on the most recent financial model that assumes about 42 million of total project costs, about 28 million coming from debt, various other sources, subordinate debt coming from CHAFA, various grants, from the town, from the Department of Housing, and other funding. I think it's that other funding $3 million number that is really kind of the unknown. And there are some avenues. If some of those numbers don't come through, there are some other avenues that could work for you. We could potentially borrow more in the public market. So this has to be kind of a sliding scale. Right now, we look at this overall, the financial picture. And again, we feel that this is a financial plan, based on our review, based on our discussion with Stiefel, who would be the underwriter of these bonds. We think this is a financial pro forma that makes sense to move forward with. We think there's a reasonable expectation that this can get financed in the public markets at that interest rate about what we are talking about with the credit support that we are talking about from the town. Things will still continue to move until we get to that pricing point, but things are going to continue to move in this until we really get to that, tightened up sources of funds where we can go and then sell the debt to kind of round that out.
That's good news.
Sub debt from CHAPA, that's also debt added to this. So it's not 27, it's over 30.
Of debt, yes. But they'll take a subordinate lien, which helps kind of the overall cash flows for the main investors.
So it's like a less restrictive loan at a lower debt coverage service ratio.
Matt can comment on the interest rate on that.
What is the rate?
Good job.
About 6. Matt said the interest rate on that's about 6.2, but
What's that,
About
5.2?
about 6,
Okay.
as well.
Well, it's good news that you think it's viable.
Yeah,
Make it
and again,
happen.
we're having many conversations with a lot of our clients about these structures.
Mhm.
Everyone is vastly different based on kind of the capital stack. Some of our other clients are probably looking to put more of credit support behind it, which then puts their financials at risk. And I thought this is a nice one where, given this current sources of funds, the limited support is enough to support it at this time. So it will have, limited to no impact on your overall financials and being able to do other projects like your public works facility.
So this debt, the 27,750, that's what would go out on the bond market?
And that would be a 30 to 40 year.
We'd start with 30 with the thought that it might need to be in kind of year 10 refinance for another 30 after that, depending on the kind of performance of the project.
And you said it's going to be 20 years before it's cash flow.
Until it's cash flow positive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Until there's excess cash flow flowing off of it, again, and that is based on the current assumptions that are built in the model in terms of occupancy. I think you're 7% vacancy.
So what happens if we need to do another one of these projects in 10 years or 5 years?
You'd probably look at them independently.
Okay.
I think that there's a lot of discussion about trying to leverage these, whether it's at the state level, at this Colorado Middle Income Housing Authority or other places. I think at first that's going to be difficult to do because you're going to have this one outstanding. To be able to leverage this one, it almost take a subordinate lien on these cash flows coming off to make sure those seniors. So it's going to be difficult unless you had multiple ones that eventually you could refinance at one time, and that might occur. But I think initially communities are looking at these independently. And the credit support might have to be different at that time, given where, interest rates are or the other sources of funds that might be available.
So conversations that we've had kind of in the past with this project is, one of the biggest questions from the town is does it make sense to own buildings C and E? And then as far as looking at future buildings and more to build out the rest of the master plan, is that something that the town should own too, or should we be leveraging like a partnership or an agreement with a private developer for the future buildings for that site through, acquisition of LIHTC funding or a good grant, or congressionally directed spending that could go to support like the next building phase for, building A and B and the townhomes there. What makes the most sense for that? Once we kind of get through this first phase, we get all the major infrastructure, we get that road connection there. This is the big haul, right? Those other buildings will have, services for water and sewer available to it. And then they're just looking at, okay, this is a little more simple. We can just look at the vertical improvements and put this out. We want to go through an RFP process or have some conversations with our current developer. We have those options as far as how we can continue to move forward with the building out the rest of the master plan, where we're not dealing with the huge upfront costs for the infrastructure and water and sewer and all this relocating and vacating and all those different things.
So this 27 million plus the sub debt, that's just vertical because the $3 million
I'll
grant
let
for,
Matt speak to what he believes is covered in this.
And this is all phase one, I believe, right? Which is
Yeah.
which
clarified
would
on this.
include the road and the bridge and.
I'll let Matt answer that. I believe so, but confirm with that.
Good evening, how are you?
Hello, Matt.
It does
Oh.
include some infrastructure.
And it-
Hi, I'm Matt Ginsberg with on Affordable Housing Development. Nice to see you. And I did sign in. This does include some of the infrastructure. The other sort of third of it is in the LIHTC sources and uses, which isn't on this page because it wasn't the focus of their, where'd you go? Their presentation. So but as a whole, we have another municipal advisor there who believes that also works. So as a whole, if A works and B works, then A plus B equals C. C works.
Don't forget, sometimes you just talk too fast, Matthew.
You think after 18 months I would learn, but I'm just excited. Usually I have a couple cups of coffee on the way. So to review, infrastructure is included here. There's another $20 million of project costs for the first three buildings. D, the LIHTC building, C and E, the building the buildings that are discussed here. And then the minimal necessary infrastructure improvements to get the road going north to south, build the bridge, vacate a bunch of different sewer and water lines, build a bunch of new sewer and water lines, make the property, the whole 11.5 acres or so, buildable, not necessarily finished lots so that they're stubbed up, but make the whole thing buildable with infrastructure nearby. All that's included between these two pro formas. And as I was trying to say, both of the pro formas reviewed by other folks works. Of course, there's a lot of work to do to get them to fully work. You know, they are a projection, but all the infrastructure is included.
So do we ever get to see the revenues and expenses? I mean, it's a little hard to make a decision based on a nice graphic here.
And there's no decision tonight, but I mean, we can, the presentation they did in May, I think it brought together building C, E, and D. And that's something else that'll be a topic of conversation as far as like when we want to move forward with building B. With Matt doing an application for a 4% LIHTC application for that. And convey that land to them if we're able to get to agreed terms through a executed development agreement with the town.
Comments on revenues and expenses?
Question, you commented on two performers right now. We're just looking at one
Indeed.
in this information. Where's the other ones?
The other one is in materials that I would prepare, which I
Okay.
was not the focal point this evening.
Okay.
For once.
All right.
But I'm delighted to provide that to you shortly.
What's the
after.
bottom line?
It's about $20 more million. There's about $3 million of long-term debt associated with that. And the rest is either a portion of the infrastructure grant and the $2.9 million that you all are putting in, and a bunch of federally and state issued tax credits.
Ah, okay.
So this debt, the 27, is that just two buildings or is that three?
These are the two middle income buildings,
Just the two?
C and E.
Oh.
B and E.
And then what's the third one? You gotta go to LIHTC and,
Yeah.
and.
So LIHTC is more straightforward because it's a well-trodden path. Most of the basis, the cost of building the building is taken care of, covered by a tax credit issued that gets awarded to the project either by the federal government or the state government, and then sold to a tax credit investor. Tax credit investor is either sort of a fund of people with positive net income, or a business. Banks have been buyers of it. Big tech companies are buyers of tax credits because they buy it at a slight discount, and then they lay off some of their tax bill with that tax credit, right? So the best way to think about it, the most simple way to think about it, is you get this tax credit, and then like whatever the size that tax credit is free equity. It doesn't require, it's already got a return embedded in it. You get it, you can build your building with it. It lowers your basis for building the building. That's how you make it affordable.
But there's still gonna be some debt associated with it.
Yeah, and there's also there's some nuance. You borrow more upfront, then the tax credit comes in and pays it down over time. The long term on that other pro forma, headline numbers, about $20 million of costs, about $3 million of long-term debt. Everything else is non-dilutive funding or tax credits.
So the purpose for tonight was kind of to look at some validation for kind of the funding approach to this, the point of view of the town owning it versus the town looking at potentially handing it to like a third party type of deal for a developer. And one, does this work? Like, so, I mean, part of our working with Hilltop is to validate that, yeah, based on the assumptions and what's listed, this works. Some of the things that we still need to work through is like the $3 million in other funding. Part of that was, had been discussed about like the $1.5 million for the childcare facility there. In addition to getting the remaining amount there. As far as how we come up with that funding and how we make it work, you know, I'll give them some kudos here. I mean, they were from the previous presentations of keeping the AMIs down and keeping the AMIs low. Increasing cost to facilitate the childcare facility was a challenge, and that's why that was okay. Let's make sense to put this with the childcare facility because that's ultimately where it's coming from. However, now, I think since recent discussions and the joint meeting with the, towns of Fraser and Winter Park is this is a project cost. If this is what you want to have housing development, affordable housing above a childcare facility, which we both see as priorities, it's a project cost. And I think that, we've had recent discussions with grandkids, actually a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and talking about the funds that are available for new childcare facilities. And we feel good that there's a good pool of grant funding that's available for this, in addition to other resources we could pull in to make that $3 million gap.
Oh, okay.
So nothing about these projects are like, this is definitely how it's going to work. This is the best estimated guess that we have with working with Mountain Affordable Housing. And just trying to show you that this is how this financial model can work. And some of the things that I just want to just touch on briefly is, I know one of the biggest questions for the town has been, third-party ownership versus the town owning these buildings. And Jason spoke to, what the town's risk is. The risk is really on the project itself. And I would say, egg on the face of the town of Fraser is the other risk, because we want to make sure that we have make this project successful and that it's not going to default and it's not going to crash and burn. That's going to work. So, part of the things to consider there, and I've had some recent discussions with some other developers in the valley here, particularly the one that built Fireside Creek, and talking to them about, what type of structure would make sense for this to be handed off to a third party. And part of the conversation is, they do not have the ability to issue tax exempt bonds, so they'd be looking at that 3 to 4% higher for just for the mortgage costs. So you're looking at that additional cost, in addition to what they would need for their return on investment for their cash that they put into the deal. So if they put, $40 million into the deal, or I think the number that I had in my head was just like $30 million that a developer puts their cash into it, they're expected to begin with a cash on cash return of 6 to 7% that initial year. So you're adding that about $1.7 million a year onto your operating expense for this building, for what you're trying to achieve these lower AMIs for. And he's happy to talk to us more about that, obviously, but just things to consider, that the town does not require a rate of return. We're not looking for that additional cash flow to make it pencil for us. We're looking to make sure that the cash flows so that it's covering its expenses. And part of this, the debt issuance for these tax exempt revenue bonds requires that reserve account, which I believe is to the tune of 3.5 million, 3.7, something like that. And that is what provides us like that security blanket in case we are having vacancies or having trouble filling the units. We're able to pull from those funds and then budget appropriately to refill those funds. And then lastly, with that, I would just say that the vested interest from the town's ownership of the buildings to make it a successful, affordable project, I think has some weight to it. A developer coming in, a third party who's going to take this on, they're not going to do it out of the goodness of the heart, and I wouldn't either. They're looking for that developer fee and that annual return on investment every year with it as well. And that adds up very quickly every year. And that's going to be something that's going to require much more of a subsidy than what we're currently looking at with the town owning these first two buildings. And again, looking at the future phases, and we'll have a discussion about building D, but looking at handing off some of these properties, once we get all this main infrastructure and these parking lots built and it's ready to go, and you got these nice, beautiful rectangle rock lots ready for building B and for building A and for those townhomes, you can have a much less variability as far as what the construction costs are for those buildings without including all this major infrastructure that needs to go in. And those will be funded, again, the way that the market is right now and discussions with Winter Park and Granby is, these are very expensive projects. And if you want them to be affordable, it requires heavy subsidy. It requires everything you can do to make it work, between it, providing land, providing the use and sales tax waivers, providing property tax abatement if you can, in addition to commitments for long-term subsidy for the town, if you're looking to achieve these lower AMIs. If you wanted to deed restrict, these first two buildings at 120 or 140% AMI, that wouldn't be hard at all. But we're trying to get this affordable housing project put in place because we know what the business community and what our community needs in general, just for workforce housing.
So, Michael, the Fraser, if we elect the Fraser Housing Authority to issue the bond, is the town of Fraser the owner of the Fraser Housing Authority, or are we essentially the owner?
That would be a more complicated structure. I know that's something that we looked into initially. We don't even necessarily, I think, have anywhere near the buy-in that we would need. And in my opinion, I don't think it's something that we would want to do in the first place, because either way, the project risk is on the project. If we're able to fund them through our revenue bonds, and please, Jason, Maddie, speak to this if you'd like to. As far as going through the housing partnership for it, I don't see any advantage to that, besides having to work with another entity in an agreement to make this project function.
The Fraser Housing Authority, does that exist now?
You are the Fraser Housing Authority.
Well, that's what I'm
Yes.
asking. So you're the Fraser Housing Authority is sort of a shell game, right? Where
Well,
essentially creating.
It's a thing you can do as a statutory town, and
Right.
that's where you do your housing.
Essentially,
business.
we are the Fraser Housing Authority.
Yes, fortunately for us.
It's like an LLC that we own.
Yeah, like it's a component unit of the town.
Okay, that's what I wanted to understand.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of gets into accounting kind of terms, like, I think it should be considered a component unit of the town. We have to look, and again, there needs to be some legal clarity as to if the Fraser Housing Authority could issue middle income, these targeted AMIs as opposed to true low income. So that's one thing that needs to be clarified. But if it can do it, again, there's probably not a lot of advantage to going to the Fraser River Housing Partnership versus the Fraser Housing Authority if it's determined the Fraser Housing Authority can do it.
Okay.
So the AMIs, that seems to float sometimes. So where are we on these buildings now?
These I believe are 104. It might be 103 and change, but 104 is my
So that's an average?
average. Yeah.
So
So there's some at 80. In order to access that sub debt from Jaffa, you have to have 20% of the homes at 80%. So 20% of the homes are at 80%. And then the rest is balanced. I mean, I have a lot of little squares on the model that I type things in until things work. So
it's an average between 80 and 120 or
that's correct.
80?
80 and
Right.
120.
And it's with the town owning the buildings, we can adjust AMIs based on the community needs, and honestly, based on, covering the expenses with the rents, to make sure that we're covering our costs. Because, if something happens and rates go up to 7%, the AMI is going to shift with it. If we get more grant funding or some type of funding that comes to the project, able to lower the AMIs. It gives it there's no major state restriction to how we can manage this project outside of the general land use covenant that was recorded when we got the property in the first place, which is just 50% of all rentals and 50% of all ownership have to be at 120% or below AMI.
There will be some covenants in your bonds to make sure you're maintaining certain coverage levels. And so that might restrict you to some extent on the movement around. If the model's going to pencil out, but you're going to have more the lower the vacancies, the more flexibility you're going to have, but you are going to have some covenants that you're going to have to maintain essentially the cash flow that are gonna be established. And those are gonna have to be developed as we start accessing and having more communications with the investors on that perspective.
So are you prohibited to, from master leasing to like Safeway? 10 units and they
That's
kind of
gonna be, I
backfill
think,
the
more of a
units?
Policy decision from the board.
That could also impact, because these are done in the tax exempt market. There's gonna be some risk, if you're doing some kind of a bulk grouping for a private company, that could impact the tax status of it, so that would need to be discussed. If there was any thought process to want that flexibility, we would need to know that in advance. We could issue a portion of these taxable to give you that flexibility. Taxable rates are about 1% higher, give or take, so you can do that, but we would need to know in advance if you wanted that flexibility.
Well, it just seems like there's some businesses that would like the opportunity to house their employees and would be willing to backfill it, but
Yeah.
you know, I don't know if that's
For an extra percent, that's
for-
tough.
that's
So one way that we've kind of thought about now, I'd be curious on your expertise on the spot with this question, but instead of a master lease, are these types of structures for these bond issuance supportive of lottery systems that have weighted values based on if you work for a local business within a certain proximity? Are you able to go more that route where someone who maybe works at a central business, or like right here in the town of Fraser versus, working in Granby versus working in Grand Lake? Would it support some type of a lottery system for those types of weighted values?
Maddie's had more conversations for another client on those kind of types of questions.
And I know there's accordance with fair housing laws and all those good things.
Yeah,
but-
I mean, from a tax status perspective, they care about who you're signing a rental agreement with, basically. So, and yes, I think one of the other entities that we've worked with has done a lottery system for some of their housing needs. And as long as you're entering into that housing, that rental agreement directly with an individual and not with a company, then it's fine. Where you start to run into issues is where you are saying, okay, we're designating these 10 units to this business and these 10 units to that business, because you're actually entering into an agreement with the business, not the renter, right? It provides you some coverage because they're essentially guaranteeing the rents on those units for, however many you're renting to them, but it creates tax issues on our side. But however you want to rent the units is really up to you. It's just a question of, as Jason was kind of saying, there will be some conversations with investors about how you're probably going to go about renting these units and sort of the flexibilities on the AMIs and things like that. So if the priority is to hit, this level of AMI with true, folks that work in the town of Fraser, and that person doesn't exist, then what is the flexibility that you all have more from a policy perspective around expanding that boundary or expanding the AMIs, things like that?
I think one thing I just want to bring up is that this kind of financial structure in the public markets is new. There's not a lot done. There has not been any done in Colorado. Like the town of Vail issued COPs, which is, could be done, but the pure kind of revenue pledge financing structure is new to this markets, as the demand for these kind of middle income 80 to 100% AMI projects are wanted and needed. So there is going to be some development in this financial plan and the covenants and things like that that are going to go along with it over time, because this is not new. We sell water bonds all day long. We sell COPs all day long. We do lots of structures that are very common in the municipal market. This is one area that is growing, so there will be some exploration that's needed to get some done. We're having conversations with other clients, and so there will be some in the pipeline over the next 12 to 18 months, but they're all going to have these kind of dialogues with investors to see what that community will take. The light tech market, much more common. It's this kind of standalone revenue bond that is developing.
So Matt,
Yes.
I have 1.5 million upfront for grandkids in my head. If it's 3 million, does that mean they're gonna own it outright right off the bat?
Oh, no. So, the the naming of that pool of dollars caused some unnecessary complications in understanding this. It does not matter whether any one of the dollars in that 41,985,982 goes to, you know, a 3-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of building E, or a studio on the bottom floor of building C, or the grandkids facility. It takes all of the dollars to get the project done the way it's designed. So there was a reason, which I won't bore everybody with, that we allocated a portion to it to grandkids, the 1.5 at some point. I've just gone back and removed that. I left formerly known as in there so folks wouldn't think that it just magically disappeared. It's just back in the pool of problems to solve, right? So we have a good idea on most of the capital stack. It's in the $3 million pool of problems to solve.
And this capital stack, Matt, is based on us achieving the AMIs that were presented at the April meeting, or the May meeting, correct?
Yeah, broadly speaking, 104 on average.
And then I thought I remembered that it was going to be 250,000 per year for the town for the first 15 years, and then our $250,000 payments were done.
Correct.
Okay.
15 or 16 years. I think it's now 16, isn't it?
Well, I think it was just a miscommunication because it starts in 2026, which is
A year later.
a year later.
Yeah. So
I think there's probably stub years, a portion of a year on either end, but I believe it actually cash flows by year 15. So I wouldn't turn the conversation on that. I'm sure we can keep it to 15.
okay.
Also, if you don't like that, like if the town doesn't like that, that's fine. That's not something that's prohibiting the deal from getting done. Say you want to put 0 in for 15 years, no problem. The 250 is about $3 million in bonds at current assumptions in here. We just have another $3 million problem to solve. We'll solve it a different way, which would allow me to segue to timing. The folks mentioned like 90 days. That means 90 days when everything else is sorted. Not 90 days while we're still designing the thing, while we might move an AMI around, while we might change the size or the shape of the unit or add an elevator. That's 90 days when everything else on that list is done. We go to the market and we present a very clean, good story, and we get the best execution terms that we can. So do not think that like, oh, if you want to build it in May, we'll just back up 90 days and we start then. No, we got to start yesterday. Okay, that was one thing I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, and to comment on that 250,000, that is meaningful in the muni market. That is a nice, consistent, revenue stream that is not subject to vacancy or other things. So that does add some meaningful credit support to investors.
So maybe in addition to having to solve the 3 million, the rate goes up a little bit, and then we have to solve a $4 million problem. But it's not like the whole thing just falls down. We just have another problem to solve.
Any other questions, guys? We don't have to take action on this.
Very informative.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We will move on now to updates. Michael has something listed here.
Yeah, I just want to provide just an opportunity for any of the board members. I think everyone on our board attended the board retreat I'm sorry, not the board retreat, the joint meeting with Winter Park. And what is in the agenda right now is just the minutes from that meeting. Just very generally, a lot of the discussion was around grandkids. Grandkids provided a presentation. Basically, we need to subsidize childcare. And I think we all know it, and it's the towns know it, the county knows it. There's good initiatives going on right now with the ballot initiative this November through the county that could support that. That's going to allow the lodging tax to support things like childcare. And I'll feel free to hop in if there's any comments from that discussion that you'd like to add. The other discussion was around mental health initiatives and those efforts that's taking place in the county. They seem to have been pretty fruitful, but yet still looking for some type of a facility or a good space that can be used either on a full-time basis or with circulatory professionals who can come in and provide services on a regular bi-weekly basis or twice a week kind of thing. Other issues or other things that were discussed was the wayfinding initiative between Fraser and Winter Park, working together on wayfinding signage off the Fraser River Trail and off of Highway 40, having some uniformity there so that people know where public parking signs, what they look like, what EV charging signs look like, what restrooms look like, as far as getting to and from major areas of our towns from either the Fraser River Trail, our different trails, and Highway 40. And they're still looking at a police facility update and continuing discussions with Rendezvous as well as other good locations there that they're considering. CDOT provided, or Brian provided an update on kind of the CDOT things that were going on. Yeah, I think the intent is to try to have these meetings maybe on a biannual basis or more, or collaborate as necessary. And I think the meeting really demonstrated a good relationship between the two towns and opportunities that we can partner together and work together and kind of drive a lot of initiatives that we both have in common forward.
Great.
That's it. All right. Any other updates from the board?
Just a brief one. You'll probably see the minutes. DDA met and we adopted bylaws and elected officers. Lori Hanna is going to be the chair, Parks Thompson, vice chair. Nick Crabb will be the treasurer, and I volunteered to be the secretary. We are going to look into a MOU with the town of Fraser for staff support initially, and possibly some seed money to get it rolling. So DDA is moving along.
Great to hear.
Thank you, Sarah.
Anybody else? Okay. So from here, we're going to be moving into 2 executive sessions, and we will not come back afterwards. We'll just adjourn the meeting. So thanks everybody for coming, and see you next time.
Great. 5 minutes.
Do we want to go into the executive session first or wait?
Yeah, take a 5-minute break.
All right, 5-minute break.
All right.
Yeah.